Natasha here from the Nextwork team, and I'm so excited to be going live today. Welcome to day one of the 7-day DevOps challenge. Let's kick off our CI/CD pipeline with a very foundational project called Setting Up a Web App in the Cloud. Now, to do this project, you do not need any AWS experience. You don't need any experience with developing web apps. Think of this as your first project. You know, if you're coming in completely fresh eyes, you're like, oh, I just really want to get started with doing hands-on things, you're at the right place. So welcome everyone, and let's get settled in. If you have any questions, just know that I am going to be looking at the chat all the time. So if you have any questions, please add it to the chat, and I'd love to talk about it with you ASAP. Awesome. So have the project guide in front of you right now. How this challenge works is you can use this demo as a guide, as a study buddy that's doing this project with you. But ideally, you have the step-by-step guide also in front of you. Now, the link to the step-by-step guide is, I'm just gonna add that to the chat too, but it's also in the description box of today's video. And as you do this project today, you'll get to fill out tasks, you get to upload screenshots, and what that means is at the end of the project, you also get to generate your own personalized documentation, and it looks amazing. So a big shout out to everyone, the 350 plus of you that's already gone ahead and got started with the challenge. For everyone else that's tuning in today, let's get started together. Okay, so in day one of our 7-day DevOps challenge, we're going to be learning the basics of building a web app using AWS and another tool called VSCode. This is going to lay the foundation for your DevOps work for the rest of this challenge. And like, oh man, I'm hyped. I'm super excited. So we're going to be launching an EC2 instance, and then we're going to be downloading VS Code because we're going to use VS Code to set up a connection to the EC2 instance that we launch. And then we're going to generate a basic web app in that EC2 instance that we launch as well. Now, I totally recognize that the words EC2 Instance is pretty damn foreign, as well as the words VS Code, Maven, and Java. So if this is your first time seeing these terms, just know that we all start somewhere, and this can be your starting point. We're going to be explaining every single concept as we go in today's project demo. All right. Now, to anyone that's new here, you might be asking, wait, what's the 7-day DevOps challenge? I'm just here to do a project. What is this challenge that you're talking about? So if this is your first time hearing about it, here's like a 30-second intro. This project is day one of a 7-day DevOps challenge where we're going to build from scratch a CI/CD pipeline that automates the build and the deployment of a web app. Now, if you click on this link here, it's going to take you straight to the introduction of the 7-day DevOps challenge if you'd like to know more. You can also unlock some bonus documentation by doing a little project that introduces you to DevOps and to CI/CD. So I'd highly recommend doing this extra bit of I guess, documentation or this little side quest if this is completely new to you. And I'll just add that to the chat as well if you'd like to check it out. But yeah, so this 7-day DevOps challenge is 100% hands-on. Get ready to write documentation so you can build your portfolio, showcase your work on LinkedIn as you go. And if you're new to the concept of CI/CD, just know that this is absolutely used in modern tech companies today. It's used in all of these DevOps job ads that you might be seeing, and it's all about making the releasing of software and the building of software as efficient as possible. Because when you're working in an engineering team, it's a huge process to go from building your code to making that code released in a live production web app that your users are using. There's so much that goes into actually making sure that the code is still gonna work for every user. It's still gonna, your new code is secure, it's tested. So CI/CD is all about automating all of these steps in between, finishing that code and putting it in front of your users. And because it makes things so efficient, it's really at the heart of the concept of DevOps too. So if you're wanting to become a DevOps engineer, you're wanting to build some DevOps experience, please do not skip CI/CD in that learning pathway. Do this challenge. I promise you, it's gonna really boost your understanding of how CI/CD works. Okay, so this is what we're going to be building at the end of all 7 projects in our CI/CD or our DevOps challenge. Let's get excited. I really like how in this challenge we're going to be breaking down all of these different parts into 7 projects. So instead of one big project where you need to like hone in all of this information, let's just focus on one thing at a time, right? So we have this challenge for our 7 days, but let's focus on that first step here, and then add layers on top of each part as we go. All right. So I'm going to be demoing this using the high-touch version of this challenge today because the high-touch version gives you step-by-step instructions for every single part. We're going to be explaining every concept. We're not going to assume any knowledge at all. Where we're going to start assuming knowledge, if you already have some experience, go for the low-touch version. And if you really want a challenge and you don't want any step-by-step guidance, go for the no-touch version. So I would say choose these at your own risk, and just know that if you ever get stuck, the high-touch is always there for you too. Cool beans. Now, as I mentioned, if this is your very first Network project, just know that as you do the step-by-step guide, as you go through it, we're going to be filling in some tasks today. And once you fill in all of these tasks, it's going to turn into a PDF documentation that gets automatically generated. I think I should be able to even show you some PDF documentation I generated for another project the other day. It's just so you guys can have a look as well. Yeah, so this is something that I did for another project. Let me show you. If you're new to Network and how project documentation works, you can even choose your own theme. So I used like a funky theme, but this is the documentation I generated for another project based on just all of the questions that I answered and all the screenshots I put in. It really helps with putting together documentation in an efficient way. So I highly recommend putting this guide in front of you as well. All right. I'm so excited. So let's get started. Before we start step 1, what are we here to do today? Let's recap the plan for today, and then let's jump into creating that web app. This project is day 1 of a 7-day DevOps challenge. In this project, we're going to we're going to set up the foundations of a CI/CD pipeline by creating a web app from scratch. This web app is, we'll need to launch an EC2 instance and what else will we need to do? So we need to launch an EC2 instance and connect to the instance over using VSCode to generate a web app inside. Okay, so that's the plan for today. You know, in one sentence, that's what we're going to be working on. So let's do step 1 together. All right, I'm going to be moving this over here now so we can have 2 screens going. I'll be working on the project guide on the left hand, on the mini side of the screen, and then on my big screen you can see all of my work. Okay, let me just open this tab one more time. Is my audio okay, by the way? I hope it's not too quiet. Let me know if it is. All right. Oh, so cool to see everyone saying hello. Hey, Josh. Hello, Gangada. Yo, Skizzers, welcome. I think it's my first time seeing you here, so welcome. Jyotesh says excited. Thank you so much. H, thank you. Love this kind of video. Let's see how it will be. It will look promising. This is cool. All right, so let's do step 1 now, which is to set up an IAM user. Do you have an IAM user is the first question. No? If not, we're going to go through the process of creating an IAM user together, and that's completely okay if you're completely new to this too. And to Abby, you don't need to be tech savvy to learn this. It truly is about just starting from the ground up. We all have to start somewhere, so think of this as your very, very first project in AWS and DevOps. So I'm excited to have you all. Let's do this together. Okay, if you don't have an IAM user, which is what I'm going to be demoing as today, I'm going to say I don't have an IAM user. Let's set one up together. If you do, congratulations. Just log in to the AWS Management Console with your IAM admin user, and then you can get started with step 2 straight away. But for everyone that's new to AWS, everyone that's wanting to get started, once you create your AWS account, we can set up an IAM user. Now, an IAM user takes about less than 10 minutes to set up, and it's all about having an account that really keeps you safe while you do these projects. So when you create an AWS account, it is a classic rookie mistake, people who love calling it a rookie mistake, to do everything as the root user of the AWS account. Now, the root user is what you get the moment you create your account. It's like, welcome to AWS, you can click around the console, you're using the root user. But actually, there's like multiple users that you can set up in your account to help protect your account from giving away your financial information, your billing information, so that if someone wants to infiltrate like anything that you do today, they wouldn't get access to everything, because they end up getting access to your admin user, which is a bit more protected than trying to get access to your root user. Okay, so what we're setting up here is not really related to the CI/CD pipeline, it's more related to your account security. So I hope together we'll just take the time, take the 5 minutes to create this IAM admin user and get started together. Okay, so I'm logged in right now as my root user, and I'm actually feeling a little nervous because I haven't logged in as the root user for honestly months now. I have just been using my admin user all this time. So let's go into the root user account, and to create your secure IAM admin user, we're gonna visit the IAM console. So search IAM and click on that first result. Okay, and now you're in your IAM console, which is the place where you set up access permissions to things. And yeah, to answer H's question, that's correct. So the moment you create an AWS account, you just get the root user, and then I'm logged into my root user right now, which is like you, and I just need to, from the root user, set up an IAM admin user within that's a bit more secure for using for your projects. Okay, so let's do that together. All right. And then I'm going to go to the Users tab from the left-hand navigation bar, and then let's click on that. And this is where you can set up users. Now, as you can see, almost exposing my account right now, we've got 2 users existing here already. But typically, if this is your first time setting up a user, you're going to see 0 users, and that's what you're supposed to see. I just happen to already have 2 users. We're going to create a new one together, though. So I'm going to click on Create User, that beautiful orange button here, and now we're able to create a user. Now let's create a user, and then you can call it your name IAM-admin. That can be your username. So for example, for myself, I can say Natasha IAM-admin like this. All right. Just for funsies, I'm gonna just call this DevOps IAM-admin like this, so that I can remind myself, oh yeah, this is the admin user I'm using for the DevOps challenge. So this is my personal preference. Before you go though, before you finish up, just make sure you select this checkbox that gives you access to the AWS Management Console. Okay, so this checkbox basically means that the user you set up is still gonna get access to this console you see here. You see this interface where we can click on buttons, where you can like do random things and access services. This is called the Management Console, and it gives you a very visual interface for using AWS. The console isn't the only way to use AWS, heads up, but by ticking this little box here, we're making sure that even when we create this admin user still has access to this beautiful interface, and it makes doing these projects a lot easier. Okay, so let's do that. Tick it up. And then you can enter a custom password here so that it's a password that you can remember and you can use. So I'm just gonna type in a cheeky password, for example. I hope this is okay. And then we just have to make sure that the password has all of these, meets all these requirements. All right. Now, after you create your password for your user, you can deselect this checkbox. So uncheck it, we want to make it empty, that says users must create a new password at next sign-in. So this is really helpful if you're creating a user for someone else. Like I have a teammate, they need a user, and technically I shouldn't know their password, but I'm just setting up their user. So this is like a great setting to use if I'm like, okay, let me just create their password for them for now so they can log in the first place. But once they log in, they should really change the password to something that only they know and I don't know anymore. So this is a great thing to check if that's your scenario. But since we're the ones that using this user, we don't need to create a new password again. So let's uncheck that. And then let's select next. All right, let's select next together. Oh, and I've got a cheeky invalid username here. I don't know what went wrong. DevOps, I am admin. Is this gonna work? Hello? Oh, that's interesting. What if I just call it DevOps? I am admin. Why am I not getting this through today? Oh, okay, that worked. Oh, this has to be the most chaotic live I've ever done. Okay, I hope this is. Do I look normal now? All right, I think I look normal now. Okay, so I think I've just got my I am admin username approved, which is great. So now that that's done, you can set your permissions. So now that you have an I am admin user set up, what are they allowed to do? Don't forget, we're an IAM, which is the service for setting up people's permissions to your account. The cool thing about IAM is that you can get very granular about what things can get access to and what they can and cannot do. So now that you've created a user, AWS is saying, okay, so what can they do? Can they even log in? Can they create an S3 bucket? Can they do this? And we're creating an admin user today. So what we need to do is we're just going to give them administrator access. Okay, so tick administrator access like this, and then select next. Administrator access means they can get access to everything. Everything. The one thing they usually don't get access to is billing information, or there's a specific category of billing information that an admin user typically wouldn't get and only a root user would get. But otherwise, the administrator has access to everything, but it's still a very, very good layer of separation from your root user when you're working on projects. Okay, user's done. Let's create the user now. So now that it has permissions set up, we're going to create the user. Are we following okay? Let me know if I'm going too fast. So we've created the user now, so this is good. Stay on this page, all right? So stay with me here, where we've created the user, and this is extremely important information, what I'm circling here. These are your console sign-in details. And then we're going to download a CSV file containing all of this information so that you always have a local copy of your sign-in information. You can also email yourself the sign-in instructions. You know, this is great if you're signing someone else up to an IAM admin user and you're like, oh yeah, here are all the details. I really like this feature if you're doing this for someone else. But for us, you know, I'm a local user, so I'm just going to download the file, and that's all I need. Cool. I see that we have a great question from Jyotish today. Jyotish wants to know, how many hours of content will this be each day? Please budget. I think it's a funny question, funny word to say for time, but please budget about 2 hours if you're a complete beginner, and a bit less if you're not a complete beginner. The number of hours per day will ramp up because every single day we're going to be doing something a little bit more compared to the last day. So I would start at 2 hours, and then a bit less if you are experienced already with AWS. By the end of that project, that 7th project, you would be spending about 3 hours if you're a complete beginner, maybe a bit less if you're familiar with AWS concepts already. Cool, I hope that helps. Okay, so I've downloaded that file now, and you can actually sign in as your admin user now. So your admin user has a different set of login details, which you have just set up. So what you're going to do is you're actually going to log out. Okay, you don't want to be in your root user. You want to minimize the amount of time you're in that root user account. Log out as soon as you can, and now with the login URL that you copied, sign back into the AWS Management Console, but this time as your IAM admin user. So those details, again, are in that CSV file, right? So you can open up your CSV file, and I just have it open in a separate window right now for privacy. But in that separate window, you're going to see that you have your username saved in there, and then you're also going to see that the password you set up is also saved in there. So you just have to copy that over. Just copy that over, and then you can select sign in. All right, let us know if you have any details seeing that, but you should be all good. Yeah, to H, who's asking, the IAM admin user must log in on a different site. So the IAM admin user has that unique console sign-in URL, which you're going to see when you create your IAM admin user. And the website is actually the same. It's just that the URL specifically helps you with logging in as an IAM admin user. So you're still logging into AWS, and you're still getting access to the same services. It's just that the URL is set up in a special way so that the moment you click on open this URL, you get to log in as your IAM admin user. You get to enter the IAM username, you get to enter that IAM password, and then you get to click sign in. Cool, I hope that's clear. Now we're done. So that is step 1 done already for your project. Once you're logged in, you're ready to use this IAM user for this project. Just please make sure to keep your login details safe because you're going to need them for the entire 7-day DevOps challenge. Make sure to just use your IAM admin user as much as you can instead of the root user. It's truly best practice for account security. All right? Okay, cool. So welcome, I guess, to my account as a root user that's completely fresh to AWS. We're going to get started from scratch together. All right, so launch an EC2 instance is going to be that first step. Before we get into the juicy work of like getting into the code and building any web app, we need to set up a home for your web app's files. Since we want the web app to be entirely created and run on the cloud, we're not going to be developing the web app locally in our local computer with local files. We're going to be even using the cloud for storing all of these files that we use to write our code. So let's get an EC2 instance up and running. This is the very, very first step here. And an EC2 instance is basically a computer that's in the cloud. You can think of it in that way. And imagine if you literally had another computer in front of you, and you can use that computer for creating your code, running code, testing your code, and it's just so much better to have like another computer with its own memory and its own storage to be running those tasks rather than trying to add all of these files to your existing computer. If your existing computer has limitations with how fast it can run things, as limitations on storage, as limitations on whether it has all the tools you need to even write code. So we're going to be using our EC2 instance to be developing our web app today. Okay, you might notice that there's something called a key pair getting mentioned here as well. So here we have a key pair, which is all about our ability to access this EC2 instance that we launch. And we also have some network settings that we're going to be setting up. And network settings basically make sure that we have access to that EC2 instance. So network settings is like saying, can you even find the instance that you're going to launch? And key pair is more like, once you found it, can you unlock it? Do you have the permission to use that EC2 instance that we're launching? And let's get started. Let's get into it. In this step, we are launching an EC2 instance in our AWS account. We're also going to set up its network settings, which helps us make sure we can find our EC2 instance, and our key pair, which helps us make sure we have the permission to use the EC2 instance, or like to access the EC2 instance. Yeah, so one, network settings is about finding it, and then key pairs is about permissions. All right. And I would just like to shout out, I know that we have a request here about zooming into the project guide screen. I'm just going to make sure that the project guide is something that you can have access to in your own tab as well once you open that link in the description box. So I'm going to just make sure that our main screen is very, very visible. I can zoom in like this. Maybe this will help. But yeah, I hope you're able to open up the project guide in front of you as well, Gangada. Is EC2 the same as VM? I would say so. I think people can get very, very into the details of the definition of an EC2 and a VM. But for myself, I would definitely 100% say, yeah, like an EC2 is a virtual machine, which is basically a server or a computer that you can access in the cloud. In fact, we're about to go into the definition of EC2 in a second, Skizzers. So we can definitely talk about that in more detail there. Okay, so now that you're here, please switch your region to one that works for you. We recommend using the following 13 regions for this project because these are the regions that actually have access to all of the services we're going to be using in the 7-Day DevOps Challenge. Now, if you were to just pick your usual region that's outside of this list, you will still be able to complete today's project. It's more that if you want to complete the entire 7-Day DevOps Challenge, I'd highly recommend just switching to a region in this list from now, so that all of the resources you create are in the same region. Otherwise, later on, trying to move things across regions is going to be incredibly hard, if not possible. So in this list, I'm just going to stick with the default one that has access to all the regions, which has access to all the services in AWS, and that's called Oregon. So US West 2, Oregon, is going to be the region I use. For yourself, I'd recommend choosing one that's closest to you that's in this list. Cool. Let me know if you have any questions there. And if you're curious, so there's a guide on AWS. It's all about AWS services that are available by region. If you really want to check, what are all of the services that are available in the certain region that you pick. There's also this website called aws-services.info if you want to find out more. But yeah, the short answer for us, I've done a little bit of the research, and these are the 13 regions that are the safest for doing this entire challenge. Okay. So once you've switched to the region of your choice, let's go into the EC2 console, and let's open that up. Now, as Skizzers mentioned just a second ago, what is EC2? And EC2 is basically a service that lets you rent and use virtual computers that's in the cloud, like virtual machines. They're like your personal computers, but imagine if there was this computer that lived in the internet instead of this physical computer that's in front of you. You can create, you can customize, you can run these computers for all different kinds of reasons. Most of the time, people use EC2 instances or EC2 computers to help them with running applications. And that's pretty much what we're doing today as well. We're using an EC2 instance to develop the code for our web app today. Now, if you want to know more, EC2 actually stands for Elastic Compute Cloud. So E and then C2, because there's 2 C's in the acronym. And elastic means it's flexible because you can create different kinds of instances, different kinds of computers whenever you want. It's kind of imagine if you had a physical computer, but at your beck and call, when you decide to, you're oh, actually, I want to use a Linux today. I don't want to use a Microsoft Windows computer. And then the next day you're oh, actually, I want to use a Mac computer. And we can't really switch like that with physical computers, but with EC2 instances, you have a lot more flexibility. Compute means computing power, because it can do various tasks, just like how you can run apps in the computer that's in front of you. Cloud means it's available over the internet. So instead of it having a physical presence, it has a virtual presence and it lives on the internet. Okay, so once we're here, let's select that Instances tab on the left-hand navigation panel. And let's select Launch Instances like this. And each instance is like another computer. So you can have like 20 instances, and that's like having 20 computers in front of you. All right, so we started this project by launching an EC2 instance because EC2 instances are like virtual computers that live in the cloud. We want our web app to live entirely in the cloud. So we're launching an EC2 instance to even develop our web app's code. All right. Okay, so under name, let's enter Nixwork DevOps your name as the name of your EC2 instance. You can also change this. So, for example, change this placeholder from your name to your actual name. So in my case, I'll be like Nixwork DevOps Natasha. And then for the machine image, choose the one that says free tier eligible, which means that you won't get charged for launching this EC2 instance today. Now, an AMI, if you're completely new to it, is actually, it means kind of like I would say it's almost like choosing, it's like almost choosing like an operating system, like an OS for your computer. In fact, if you want to know more, you can always highlight a text in our project guide and press that Ask button. And you can say, what is an AMI? What does it mean? And you can watch your Nixwork project guide answer that question for you. So in our case, I just asked, what is an AMI? What does it mean? And we now find out that an AMI is a template that contains the software configuration for your EC2 instance. It's like a blueprint for creating a virtual computer. It defines the operating system, the OS, like what I mentioned, applications that might already be inside, and other settings that will be installed in your instance. It's kind of like you're choosing like what's inside your computer, like the software side of your computer. Because next up, we have your instance type, which is almost like the hardware of your computer. So let me use Ask now and just say, what is an instance type? How does that compare to an AMI? What's the difference? Let's ask our project guide and see what we find out. Okay, so an instance type is a specific kind of configuration of virtual hardware resources, for your EC2 instance. It determines the CPU, memory, storage, and network capacity. An AMI is the template for the operating system. So, wow, cool. We even get a little analogy here. Think of it this way. An AMI is like a recipe for a cake. It tells you what ingredients to use, how to bake it, whereas the instance type is like the size of the cake pan. It determines how big the cake will be. Very cool. Now, again, just make sure that whatever instance type you pick, I would highly recommend T2.micro, this one here, because it is free tier eligible. Again, it means you don't get charged for doing this project and launching that instance. Now, you can now create a key pair, which is like the permissions side of what we're setting up today. So remember how we said in this step we're doing network settings and we're also doing permission settings. The permission settings part is the key pair, and it's like the keys to unlock your virtual computer. A key pair is called a pair because it has two halves. The first half is a public key that AWS keeps, and then the second half is a private key that we're going to download the moment we create this key pair. You're going to use the private key to go say, hey AWS, I'm going to want to get access to this EC2 instance. Here's my private key. And then your EC2, and then AWS is going to take your private key. It says, oh, you want to connect to this instance? Let's check if you have the permissions. And it's going to take your private key and compare it to the public key that it has kept for itself. And it's going to say, oh, can these two unlock each other? Is this the right private key to unlock this, this key that I have? And if it unlocks, it means that yes, you are supposed to have access to this EC2 instance, which gives you access. So we're going to create a new key pair to give us access to our EC2 instance. So this one is sitting right here, create new key pair. Let's click on that, and let's create a key pair. We're going to use NextWord key pair as our key pair's name, and then we're going to keep these default settings for our key pair type and the format. All right, so let's create the key pair straight away. Boom. And you're going to see that you have a key pair downloaded. The private key is going to get downloaded over here. So this is your half of the key pair. Keep this safe, because every time you want to unlock and access your EC2 instance, you're going to need to give AWS your key pair or your private key so that it can match it up and give you access to the EC2 instance. Awesome. So we've created the key pair now, and let's store it somewhere safe, okay, before we lose track of it, which happens all the time. Okay, this is the part where I confess that I've lost track of private keys in the past. It's going to be very important that we organize it somewhere safe. So let's go to our local computer's desktop, which is, I would say, probably the easiest way to access things. And we're going to create a new folder in our desktop. I'm going to create a new folder here, and I'm going to call that folder DevOps. Pretty simple name, eh? Actually, I just realized you can't actually see my screen properly, so let me find a second way for you to see my desktop. So this folder represents my desktop, and I've just created this new folder here, and it's called DevOps. Whoa. All right, so I've just created a new folder here called DevOps, and let's move that private key you downloaded. It's called a .pen file. That's your private key, and move that from the downloads into your desktop so it doesn't get lost in your downloads. All right, so let's take a screenshot of the fact that, just to prove to yourself, okay, that you've downloaded your private key and it's safely in a folder called DevOps. Let's take a screenshot of that, and let's upload that into your documentation. And to Gangada, that's asking a great question here. Yes, we are using an SSH connection today. But that's in the next few steps. Cool? All right. A key pair is a mechanism for us to get access, or to connect and get access to EC2 instances we launch in AWS. We've created a key pair to for the EC2 instance that we're launching. And if you'd like to find out how much you should say here, you can also click next and have a look at a preview of the next question. Oh, okay, interesting. Key pairs work by having two halves: a public key that AWS keeps and a private key that we download. AWS will authenticate our private key when we want to connect to our EC2 instance later. By matching it to the private key that it has. Okay, so that's our key pair explained and it's going to go into our documentation. It's going to look so fly when it's in our documentation. And let's also mention the file that was downloaded. Once we set up our key pair, AWS automatically downloaded the private key file called nextwork keypair.pim for safekeeping. We moved that private key file into a folder called DevOps in our desktop. All right. Now we're not done setting up the EC2 instance yet. Again, we have security sorted, key pair sorted, and now we have network settings to go. So network settings is about how can you even find your EC2 instance? Because don't forget, this EC2 instance is going to live in the cloud. It's not going to be physically in front of you. So how do you know how to find it? How do you know that there's actually a path between your computer and the EC2 instance that you want to connect to? So network settings is all about making sure that there is a path that can be drawn between your computer and the EC2 instance. So here, we're going to just say, we have some default settings already set up for us. These are great default settings to use. And we're going to use a special setting for this part. So in this part of the network settings, it says allow SSH traffic from anywhere. Now this is not really good security practice because allowing SSH traffic from anywhere basically means that anyone can try to connect to your EC2 instance. If you're new to SSH, here's a little explanation for us to learn about together. SSH is actually a protocol, which means that it is used to help authorized users access a server. In our case, we want to use SSH to authorize ourselves and access this EC2 instance that we're launching. So it's also a type of traffic. So once SSH is done authorizing you, it says, yep, you're allowed to use this EC2 instance. We also call SSH a type of traffic, which means it is a type of connection between you and the EC2 instance where you can transfer data. Okay, so you can think about it in two ways. SSH is the protocol that authorizes you and says you can have access. It's also the traffic where you are sending data back and forth with the EC2 instance once you've set it up. So if we're going to say allow SSH traffic from anywhere, we're basically saying anyone can try to connect and send data like back and forth with your EC2 instance if they have the permission to. This just isn't good security practice, so you want to change this to allow SSH traffic from my IP. Okay, so you have my IP here, and it automatically grabs your IP address. And if you'd like to double check whether that's correct, you can also always Google what's my IP address like this, and it should tell you here. So my IP address is like this, and then it matches up with whatever AWS has automatically picked up for me. So this is correct. Great. All right, so you guessed it, everything new that we learn, it's always great to reflect on it straight away. So let us mention what is SSH. SSH is the protocol that authorizes users like ourselves to access remote servers like EC2 instances. It's also a type of traffic that lets us transfer data back and forth with our EC2 instance once we're connected to it. We enabled SSH so that we can securely connect to our EC2 instance later, and we made sure that it only allows SSH traffic from our IP address for security. Great. Oh, my spelling needs a bit of work. Send me to school, my goodness. Okay, so SSH is the protocol that authorizes users like ourselves to access remote servers like the EC2 instance we're launching. It's also a type of traffic, which means it lets us transfer data back and forth with our EC2 instance, which basically means we're like communicating with it. Traffic can feel like a bit of a technical term, but for example, when we go and visit a website, that's also traffic. That's website traffic, or some people might call it, HTTP or HTTPS, and that's like you're sending data back and forth with whichever server is hosting that website. So traffic is happening all the time. It's just that we're finally calling it out as what it is in a technical term. All right, all done. Okay, all this setup is finished now, so we can select Launch Instance and create this virtual server that lives in the cloud. All right. Okay, so we've launched our EC2 instance, and we're now ready to install VSCode. Do we have any questions so far? I'm doing a dramatic pause here to check the chat and just make sure if you have any questions, now's the time to ask it. Okay, and in the meantime, let's install VSCode. And if you're new to VSCode, don't be alarmed, it's all good. Now that your EC2 instance is set up and running, VSCode is kind of like a tool for us to, one, connect with that EC2 instance, but more importantly, create and edit the code for your web app. Okay, so if you're new to VSCode, just know that it's used all the time for creating and editing code. But there's also some handy extensions that let us connect with the instance directly from VSCode. So we're going to learn how to do that together, but this step is all about just installing it. Let's just install VSCode and get it set up. All right, so we're going to download VSCode in this step, okay? And then we're also going to set up a terminal in VSCode, which is kind of like a way for us to communicate with our computer. It's kind of like the place to communicate with it. Just like how, you have this interface, this click and drag kind of interface, this console to communicate with AWS. A terminal is a way for you to communicate with your computer. And then we also have a little thing that we're going to need to do to update our key pairs permission settings so that we can use it to log into our EC2 instance later. All right, in this step, we are going to install VSCode, which is a tool that lets us write and edit code, and it's free. Heads up, it's totally free. You don't need to pay for it. We're also going to need to set up a terminal and update the permission settings of our key. All done. So do you have VSCode installed on your computer? Yes or no? If you don't, that's all good. We're going to be installing VSCode together right now. All you got to do is head to the VSCode website. So let's open it here. All right, we got the VSCode website open now. And we're going to just follow the instructions for your operating system. So your computer's operating system, if you're like, oh, wait a second, I have no clue which one of these options works with my operating system. That's such a normal feeling to have, and that's why we have set up also many instructions here that helps you identify which version you should be selecting. So for my case, I'm going to select the Apple icon from the top left-hand corner because I'm using a Mac. And then it says that my chip says Apple. Okay, my chip says Apple. So I'm going to be selecting the Apple Silicon version instead of the Intel chip version. Okay, so you can follow the instructions for your operating system too. All right, so I'm gonna be selecting that one and let it start downloading. If I'm not wrong, it takes about 30 seconds to download. So let's wait those 30 seconds. And then once you download it, you're gonna see a zip file that you're gonna need to unzip. All right, this is my downloads folder. And I can see that I have a zip file now for VSCode that I'm gonna click open and unzip. Cool, and once it's unzipped, let's click on it again to open it. And if you get this little question about, are you sure you want to open it? Like, is this sus because it's from the internet? Just know that VSCode is a very, very trusted app to use, so it's safe to open. I'm going to click open now. And welcome to VSCode. If this is your very, very first time setting up VSCode, you should be extremely excited because this is just an awesome tool to have. All right, so I can see that's taking a little bit of time to open up for myself, which is totally okay. I'll wait. Cool. All right, it's taking its sweet time today, isn't it? Hello. I wonder. Oh, okay, it's still opening. So I'm just gonna wait another second. I'm gonna practice patience today. Is it open? Oh, okay, it is open. It's just on my other window. All right, so welcome to VSCode. This might look a little bit different for you if you've never installed VSCode before. I have installed VSCode before, which is why it's kind of opened up in a way where it's kind of familiar already. But you might have a different welcome page, and that's completely normal. So let's just take a screenshot of our welcome page for VSCode, and let's add that to our documentation. Okay, what is VSCode? Let's jump into it and just mention that VSCode is an IDE. So I know I just realized I haven't mentioned IDE just yet, but we do talk about it in our project guide, which I highly recommend reading in detail. And an IDE basically means an integrated development environment, which means software that helps you write and edit code. You know, if you want to call Microsoft Word or Google Docs a place where you write documents, VSCode is a place where you write code and code files. Okay, so VSCode is an IDE that we're using today to write and edit our web apps code. It also has handy extensions that lets us directly connect to an EC2 instance so that we can write and edit code that will live inside the instance. Oh, I see. That's the next question. We installed VSCode to write and edit our web apps code today. I just realized I'm repeating myself a little bit. So I'm not the biggest fan of like repeating myself too much. So I'm gonna see if there's anything else I can mention about VSCode. Okay, so I'm gonna update my definition for the previous one so that I'm repeating myself a bit less. I'm going to say VS Code is one of the most popular IDEs in the world. As an IDE, developers, or you can say engineers, use it to manage their coding projects. We installed VS Code to write and edit our web apps code. We'll also going to make the most out of the ability to connect directly with an EC2 instance. So all done. If you'd like and you're wondering, oh, my VS Code open in light mode, you can always click on the settings button, by the way, and then select, I think, oh, there's something called, this is, oh no, not the command palette. I clicked on the wrong button there. You can click on settings here, and then you can find the words color theme. Just search the words color theme. And in here, in color theme, you can select which options you want for your VS Code IDE. All right. So now that we're here, we're going to be opening up a terminal in VS Code. So let me just put this in full screen so we can see. Oh, we can see VS Code in all of its glory. And we're going to open up a terminal like this and select New Terminal from the drop-down. And a terminal is basically where you send instructions to your computer with clicks, with text instead of clicks. So imagine if instead of having to click on terminal and run new terminal, you get used to like keyboard shortcuts, right? Like using the keyboard to do things instead of using clicks. And a terminal is like a very, very extended version of that, because you can start creating files using commands just by running text commands. You can edit files, you can upload things, download things, delete things. You can basically do everything that you can do using clicks, but this time with a simple text command through this terminal instead. So you're really just opening up a different way to communicate with your computer, because when you're clicking on things, you're telling your computer what you want it to do, and it's just responding to your commands over clicks. And then with the terminal, again, you're telling your computer what you want it to do, but this time it's going to respond to your commands that are sent over messages like text. So every computer has a terminal. On Windows, it's called Command Prompt or PowerShell. Mac OS and Linux, we use terminal as well. Now in your terminal, we're going to navigate to your DevOps folder. So we're going to type in cd desktop/DevOps. And if I'm not wrong, I have a feeling this is missing a tab right now. There should be a tab here that says the Windows instructions for this. So I'm just going to quickly ask, what are the Windows instructions for this command? Okay, there we go. So on Windows, you can use the following command instead, which is cd, and then there's a capital C, /users/your username/desktop/DevOps. And then make sure to replace your username with your actual Windows username. Use the command called whoami in order to figure out what your username is if you don't know what it is. Okay, so these are the Windows commands. I hope that helps. Great. Okay, and here we're basically telling your terminal that you want to open up this folder that's in your desktop. I hope you remember that we did create the DevOps folder just together when we wanted to store our private key file. So we're just going to navigate to that now, and we're just inside that folder now. Cool, and let's reflect on what a terminal is. A terminal is a I would say a terminal is a place for us to send commands to our computer, i.e. tell it what we want it to do. And of course, the difference between a terminal and our usual, I would say, click, drag interface is that we send commands, we send text commands in the terminal. The first command we ran for this project is cd desktop/DevOps, which navigates the terminal to the DevOps folder. Awesome. So once you're in the DevOps folder, you might want to check if your private key file is there. So you can run the command ls, and look at that. You can see the name for your private key file shows up next to keypair.pem. I hope it looks familiar to you. It's the equivalent. It's basically like saying we just open this folder and we checked what's inside, which is next to keypair.pem, except now that information is showing up over the terminal instead of like a visual click and drag interface. So I'm gonna double check again. I think ls is missing a Windows tab again. So what is the Windows instruction for this command ls? Oops. Okay, if you're using Windows, please know that you can use an alternative command called dir, which is like directory. Awesome. Now we're going to change the permissions of the PEM file. So here we're going to run a command. For Linux, it's chmod 400, and for Windows, here's the Windows equivalent. So here the tabs are working. Phew. But we've got a command here to run that helps us give us permission to edit this private key file. So we're changing the permissions of this key file, private key, so that you can access it when you want to connect to your EC2 instance. By default, a private key is set up to have max security, which basically blocks out everyone from reading the file and using the file. So here we're changing the mode of it. We're saying, hey, I know you have max security, but can you at least give me access to use this private key? And then once you run this command, you now have access to use this private key, which is great. So don't forget this step. It's small, but very, very important. It can make a big difference in the next few steps of this project. Okay, so let's take a screenshot of the command we ran so far. And let's put that in our documentation, shall we? Okay, and I'll just quickly answer this, and I'll answer a few questions that's in the chat right now too. We also updated our private key permissions by running the command, and this is where you enter your command. So for myself, it's the chmod command, which is to change mode. But maybe if you're using the Windows equivalent, use the Windows equivalent. This command gives ourselves access to use the to use this file, so we can use it to connect to an EC2 instance. Okay, all done. Now I see that we have a few questions in the chat, so let's talk about it. Great questions, everyone. So nice work, Skizzers, for mentioning the Windows equivalent. That's correct. Totally on the money there. And Sachin has a quick question. I downloaded the VS app and it wasn't a zip, rather a straight up setup file and download it to my user local, or do I have to install it to my desktop DevOps folder? Great question, and you've done the right thing there. You don't need to install it to your desktop DevOps folder. Setting it up to your user local is the right move, Sachin. So great question, I'm really glad you asked that. Gangada, here we are connecting to the EC2 through VS Code. Not yet, we are still in the terminal. I know we have VS Code, the app, open, but right now what we have open really is the terminal. We're not connecting EC2 through VS Code yet. Technically, we're just connecting it through our terminal, which is a slightly different game, because a terminal is something that belongs to your computer. It's not something that belongs to VS Code. It's just that you can access your terminal from VS Code. You can think of VS Code almost like an interface for your terminal. This is different from connecting to your EC2 through VS Code, and I'm going to show you the difference, but you're going to see that in later steps of this project. We're not going to try jump too far ahead here. Abuzar, great question. I lost my pen file. How to recover it? So the thing is, once you have lost your pen file, you've lost your pen file. Usually there isn't an easy way for you to re-download the pen file for your public and for your private key. So if you've really lost it, just have a look first and see whether it's still in your downloads folder, by the way, or if it's in the DevOps folder that you set up. If you've really lost it, I would recommend setting up a new key pair. This time, just making sure that we keep that file safe in our DevOps folder in the desktop. So because you're setting up a new key pair, that also means you need to set up a new EC2 instance with it. So I would recommend going back into step 1 and redoing the step for setting up the EC2 instance, and then with that, set up a new key pair so that you can download that private key file. Great question, Abuzar. Cool. So thank you so much, Gangada. Okay, everyone. So we have just changed the permissions of our private key. So now we're going to connect to our EC2 instance. Your EC2 instance is working with you, is working now, and you set up VS Code, tick, tick. Now you have the ingredients to set up a connection to the EC2 instance. Once you're connected, we can work inside your EC2 instance to set up that web app. Okay? So again, we have VS Code open in front of us, and VS Code is kind of like an interface that we can use to edit code. It also has an interface for the terminal, which means that we can directly type in commands to send to our local computer from VS Code. So we're going to be using the terminal now to try connect to our EC2 instance. Over the terminal, in this step, we are going to try to connect to our EC2 instance. Once we've connected, what's the point of connecting it? We can start setting up our web app code inside. All done. All right, so let's head back to your AWS Management Console now. And here we have the Instances tab from the left-hand navigation panel that you can click on one more time. So you can select on Instances one more time, and you can click on the checkbox next to your instance name. So I'm going to just call out the fact that I have a few instances already in my account, so it's going to be a little harder to find my instance, in this big list. What will be easier is if I searched for it. So I'm going to say DevOps. Next with DevOps your name is the name of my EC2 instance. So I'm going to be using this one. Oh, I don't think actually. I think I might have used another name. There we go. I think this is it. So next with DevOps Natasha was the instance that I launched. So I'm going to be selecting this one. Oh, hello. All right, so we're gonna select this one. Just check the checkbox next to it. And then you're gonna open up the details panel for your instance. Look for this area of your EC2 instance details. It should say public IPv4 DNS. So this section is super important. It's like saying this is the address of your EC2 instance. Otherwise, where is your EC2 instance? It has to live somewhere, you know, in the cloud world. So what is its cloud address? Okay, and we're basically saying that this is its address in the cloud. I want to call out that there are multiple different addresses that you're going to see. You can see that there's something called a private address, a public IPv4 address, a public IPv4 DNS, and in private IP DNS name, there's so many different kinds of addresses that you can see in the details panel, but we're not going to confuse ourselves too much. Just know, for now, the important address we need to know is this one, because it's like the public address to your EC2 instance. Okay, the local computer is going to thank you that you have the address here, because otherwise your local computer wouldn't really know how to find the instance. Now that you have this public IPv4 DNS, it's kind of like giving to your computer, this is the location of the EC2 instance that I've just launched. And your computer's going to say, oh, thank you, now I know where to go to connect to that EC2 instance. Otherwise, you can't really just tell your computer, hey, I launched an EC2 instance in AWS, go connect to it. Your computer's going to get really confused. It's not going to know where it is until it knows the address. Yeah? So make sure you copy that address, and we're going to answer this question together now. Okay, so we have some good questions in the chat right now. We have Sachin saying, I think I'm lost. I'm not seeing my terminal command starting with Nextwork. Instead, it's the address to my local. That is correct, Sachin. So if you see your own local kind of computer's name, so your local username, instead of Nextwork, that is correct. It's simply the fact that my local is called Nextwork. That's why it says Nextwork. I appreciate that must have been a bit confusing to see, but if you see your own like local address and your own local name, that's the correct thing to do. That's the right thing to see. You're not supposed to see Nextwork unless your local also happens to be called Nextwork. Okay, so what is a server's IPv4 DNS? Let's answer that here. A server's IPv4 DNS is like its public address that identifies where the server lives in the cloud. In our case, an EC2 instance's IPv4 DNS is useful information to give to our local computer. It tells our local computer where to find the EC2 instance that we launched. Okay. Awesome. So this next step coming up has a few important details, so listen up. Let's take extra care here now. We're going to try to connect to that instance via SSH. Remember SSH? Remember how we talked about how it's like a protocol for authorizing you, and it's also a type of traffic. We're now going to be doing exactly that. Okay, so we're now going to go to SSH, and we're going to say, hey, I really want to connect to this EC2 instance from my local computer. Can I? Okay, so we're going to try give SSH the details of our private key, because we have our private key, and we're going to say, here's my private key, here's the address of the EC2 instance I want to connect with. Can we do that? Can we make it happen? Okay, so next up, we are going to run this command to connect to our EC2 instance. So the command goes like this. We're going to type in SSH Awesome. So the command goes like this. We're gonna type in SSH, and then we're gonna write -i. And here we have a placeholder. It says path to your .pem file, and then we have EC2 user at your public IPv4 DNS. I understand it's a bit overwhelming the first time you see it, so let's break it down. SSH is the command name. So we're gonna say, hi SSH, can I connect to an instance? Here is the instance, here is my private key details. And now we're gonna need to find the path to your PEM file. So we're gonna tell SSH, this is where my private key lives. And that's the reason why it's so important to have your key somewhere that's easy to find. Okay, so in our case, I can use, I can write the address, the location of my PEM file by right-clicking on this little breadcrumb, and then using this feature that says copy the network-keypair.pem as path name. So this is a way that you can get this done really, really quick if you're using Mac. And then you can paste that and say, this is the path to my keypair.pem. And then we can keep on going with the command. I'm gonna pause here because I know not everyone has access to that feature that I just demonstrated. I just thought I'd show you this little shortcut in case you're a Mac user. So what you can do here is you can go ask, and again, if you have a question, don't hesitate to ask your project guide. How can I find the path to my private key file using a terminal command? Okay, so what we are seeing here as the outcome, here's a tip for how you can do it. It's to use the command print working directory. So I'm going to demonstrate how you can use this feature to figure out the path to your PEM file. Now, let's say I haven't run this command. Let's say I'm just running a new command from new, and I just need to say print working directory. Okay, print working directory tells me that this is the location of where I'm at. I'm inside the DevOps folder, and here is like this list of folders or directories you have to go into to get to the DevOps folder. And then I just have to say ls again. And then we have network-keypair.pem as the name of our keypair file. So to find the full path to my keypair file, I simply have to copy this, which is the path to the folder, and I have to go /, which is the path to the keypair file. So network-keypair.pem. This is my keypair file's full path name. Okay, so what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna just put what I've found manually into the command, into that same command. So that command was ssh-i. Copy that full path that you found, paste that here. Oof, that doesn't look too pretty, does it? Okay, paste that here. That's the full path to your keypair file. And then you're gonna use EC2-user at, and then you're gonna copy that DNS, that address that you found, and paste it here. So that's how you can piece together your full command for using SSH and connecting to your EC2 instance. Now, EC2 user is basically the default username for a user to access your EC2 instance. So EC2 user is going to be the standard name that we're all going to use because we all launched an Amazon Linux instance. If you're not using an Amazon Linux instance, please find the instructions that replaces EC2 user with something else. But I wouldn't go into too much detail because if you want to find those details, all you got to do is just highlight it, press ask, and then ask your project guide again. How can I do this if I launched a so-and-so instance? I hope everyone is doing okay with finding the finding the command. And Skizzes has a great question. Do you have to use the full path, or will relative path work too? Skizzes relative path will work too. So thanks so much for checking. And for anyone that's new to that phrase, relative path basically means a path that already is a path that already assumes the folder that you're in. So in our case, you know how when I typed in pwd, print working directory, it told me that I'm already in the DevOps folder. If I use Skizzers, their strategy, what I would do is I would just assume I'm already in the DevOps folder, and then the path will simply be the name of the file because I'm already in the folder. But that's something that you can do if you're very, very familiar with path names. Otherwise, the full path name is the safer way to go. All right, so this is a step where it's very, very easy and common to get stuck, okay? So if you ran this command and something is not right, we have a bunch of troubleshooting guides that you can use here, different kinds of errors that you can look into that we've all solved in the community before. So please check these guides out and feel free to add your own question, if it's not solved yet. Now your terminal, once you've connected, is going to say, this key is not known by any other names. It's basically saying, hey, I've never connected to this instance before. Is this safe? And you're going to say, yes, it's safe because it's an EC2 instance that you've launched. So now you see this little birdie, which is the best bird in the world. Do you know why? Because this bird basically confirms to you that you've successfully connected to your EC2 instance. Look at this bird. It's looking so fly. And it basically confirms with us, congratulations, you've connected to your EC2 instance. Yay! We did it. So that's a nice win to have. And once you're connected, you can also see that your terminal is going to change the name here. Right? It doesn't say network for me anymore. It says EC2 user at the IP address of our EC2 instance, which basically tells us that we're now using the EC2 instance that we launched. Cool. So I'm going to take a happy screenshot of our cool bird and the terminal, mentioning that we're now connected to the EC2 instance. And let's answer this question. To connect to our EC2 instance, we ran the command ssh-i path to private key, and it was EC2 user at IPv4 address of EC2 instance. This command sets up an SSH connection directly between our local computer and the instance. Okay, so all done. We're almost done, team. That was very, very fast. We just have 3 more steps to go, and we're just going to install some tools now. These tools are called Maven and Amazon Corretto 8, and they're the tools that will help us build a web app. When you build a web app, you're going to need a few tools, okay? And that's the reason why we're installing this. One of the tools is the programming language that you're going to use to create your web app. In our case, we're going to be using Java for our web app. And that's why we're installing Amazon Corretto 8, because it's a version of Java. Another tool that we want to use is called Maven. We're going to get to know Maven a lot more throughout this project. But in short, Maven is basically a tool that helps you use templates to generate your project very, very quickly. And once it's generated, Maven is the tool that really helps with running the web app and compiling the web app code so that a computer can actually use it and deploy it to your users. Maven is going to be a very, very key tool throughout this entire series, so I pay special attention to Maven in this project. Okay, so let us talk about what we're doing in this step. In this step, we are going to install Maven and Java, Corretto 8, in our EC2 instance. We're doing this because both tools are important for setting up a Java web app. I would say actually helpful for setting up a Java web app from scratch. Okay, cool. Oh, awesome. Just wanted to shout out that we have Timtimol AI Studio saying hey. I remember Timtimol AI Studio and I, we did one of our AI projects together on another live, so it's good to see you here again. Okay, like I mentioned before, we're here to talk about Maven a lot in this project, and if you're new to it, you might be thinking, what is Apache Maven? So Maven is a tool that helps developers build and organize Java software projects. It's also called a package manager. So after you build your software project, or you write the code for it, you're going to need a package manager to download pieces of code that your project depends on to work. We're going to talk a lot more about packages in the third project of this series. But we don't need to really know package management in this project. So if that is a bit confusing to you, just know that's totally okay. And we're going to go into more detail in the third project of the series. Now, it's super useful for kickstarting web projects because it uses something called archetypes, which are like templates. And archetypes help us lay out the foundations for different kinds of projects. In our case, we're going to tell Maven, can you use the archetype for web app to help me kickstart a web app? So let's install Apache Maven together now, and let's run this piece of code here. Okay, off it goes with installing Apache Maven. And it's all done. So we've installed Maven now inside our EC2 instance. And these commands, I understand, I appreciate it's like multiple lines and it might be a little bit confusing. So these commands in order basically says, hey, I want to download a file for setting up Maven. Let's download the file. And once you download the file, we're basically saying, can we open the file and put the Maven that we install from opening that file in a special place called path. And once it's in path, it means it's going to be a lot easier to call Maven commands later in this project. But basically, in short, what we're doing in these four spicy lines is, hey, here's the link to Maven. Can we download this link to Maven? And can we open up the package that we install by visiting that link? And once we open that package, we're installing Maven. Can we now save a shortcut to Maven inside our path so that later on it's going to be very easy for me to call Maven commands? Apache Maven is a tool that helps us with creating, I would say, I was gonna say a package manager, but I realized I don't think package manager is gonna be very helpful here. We want to actually just say it's gonna help us with organizing Java projects like this web app. It has a lot of use cases. Like being a package manager, downloading external pieces of code, and what else? Aside from being a package manager, it is also the tool that uses archetypes, which are like templates, for spinning up projects like web apps. Oh, I just repeated myself. All right, that's okay. We're just gonna say Maven is required in this project because we want to use its ability to spin up web apps using archetypes. We're about to set up our Java web app using the web app archetype. All right, team, let's keep on going. And now that we have Maven installed, next up is to install Java 8, or more specifically, Amazon Corretto 8. So here are very, very similar lines. Again, we're trying to install Java, and then we're trying to save a shortcut to Java inside our EC2 instance. So let's run that piece of code now, and off it goes with installing Java, which is going to take a little bit longer than Maven. But here are some details about Java. All right, so I'm gonna sip on a bit of tea first. And if you're new to Java, just know that Java is a programming language, and it's a language that we're gonna use to build different types of applications. In our case, we're just gonna use it for a web app, but you can also use it for mobile apps, for example. Maven, which we just downloaded, needs Java to operate. If you don't install Java, you don't get to use Maven to generate or build your web app. That's why we really need it. Amazon Corretto 8 is a very reliable and free version of Java that's provided by Amazon, which is why we're using that today. Okay, so the commands that we ran is all about installing Java Corretto 8, telling your instance how it can find Java, and then saving Java's location, that shortcut that I talked about, so you can run Java commands from anywhere in your EC2 instance. Cool. If you saw this text, and just know you don't need to understand every line, definitely not. The terminal was just telling you its progress with installing Java. All right, and this time I'm going to be smarter and preview what the two questions are. We've got what is Java, and why we're using Java in this project. Okay, Java is the programming language that we're using to develop our web app. And then you can also say, you can use Java to develop all different kinds of applications, from mobile apps to large enterprise systems and web apps. Awesome. So why we're using Java in this project is because it lays the foundation of the writing of our web app code. It's just like needing to know a language in order to speak it. Maven also needs Java in order to work. All right, so to verify that we've installed everything correctly today, let's run some handy commands to check. To check if we've installed Maven, it's mvn-v. So let me just clear my terminal and make this easier to read. So we've got mvn-v to check our Maven version, and we've got a Maven version here, 3.5.2. Very good. So this tells us that we've got Maven installed correctly. If you don't see a version number, it means you might need to run the commands for installing Maven again. Next up, let's run java-version. This tells us the version of Java 8 that we've installed. And again, we've got it correct. It should really say 1.8, because it's Java Corretto 8 that we're installing. And just make sure it returns 1.8 point something as your Java version. Awesome. So we're getting really close now. We're now ready to just assemble. We're going to go straight to generating the web app now, and let's get into it. So we're generating our web app inside our EC2 instance using Maven and Java. All right, so let's select done, and let's generate a web app. So let's run these commands. And what these commands do is I just realized this command is going really, really fast. I hope it's not too intimidating. Okay, does that look a bit better? I guess it moves slower, which is kind of comforting. But anyway, so when you run Maven commands, you're basically asking Maven to perform a task. And this command, see how it starts with Maven, MVN, like this? We're basically saying, hey Maven, I've got a task for you. And the task is to use your archetype, the template feature, to generate a web app. So this is the archetype ID. I want to use the archetype for a web app and use that to generate a web app called Next Web Project. Okay, so that's basically what we're saying in that command there. And we're just going to watch out for this build success at the end. That basically is Maven's confirmation that it's finished building your web app. Crazy that it does this in just 11 seconds. Crazy fast speed. It means that the template for creating a web app was just generated in an amazing amount of time. Okay, so let's take a screenshot of our build success message. We generated a Java web app using the command nvn, and I think it was generate archetype generate. What was the next two? Okay, so we're going to say this command tells Maven to generate a web app using an existing template that it has. It also tells Maven to call the generated web app project nextwork-web-project. Cool. Can you see your Java web app now? Can you see it? Is it anywhere in your computer? We've just generated a web app. Where are the files? Can you find it? Where can you go? Where would you go in order to find your web app's files? Because it tells us that it's built it. So can you see it in your computer? How do you think you could find and edit your Java web app's files? Don't worry, this is more like a brainstorming kind of question, so your response won't go into your documentation, but I'd highly recommend that you give this a go and just have a try at thinking about where would you go to actually find the web app you generated. I'm just going to go open a window in the meantime. Awesome. So we've got a URL given, suggested by Gangada. Maybe we're going to get a URL to access our web app. And I see we have a request as well from Abuzar about the series itself. Can we make a full DevOps series? If you can cover some other tools like Jenkins or GitHub Actions and some other tools like Docker and K8's Kubernetes. Yeah, we have Docker and Kubernetes projects already. And in terms of Jenkins and GitHub Actions, trust me, that is something that we are thinking about too. I'm excited to share more later. Awesome. And hi to Isaac. What a legend. Isaac is an absolute project legend in the Nextcloud community. Thanks so much for coming by. All right. So maybe you can access your web apps files over a URL. Yeah, this is going to be interesting. So right now, what we've generated is not a web app that's already on the internet. We've generated some files that helps us with writing the code for our web app. So we're going to see how we can even find the files in the first place. All right, so in our amazing final step for this project today, we're going to now connect VSCode with our EC2 instance. So in this step, you might be thinking, have I really set up a web app? Where the heck is it, if I've set it up? So we're going to try connect VSCode with our EC2 instance to actually see our web apps files. We're even going to interact with one of those files called index.jsp in this step. And now you might be thinking, I thought I've already connected to our EC2 instance. We literally talked about connecting to it and in my terminal showing this. Yep, so far we've connected with SSH in the terminal. Okay, this is not VS Code that we're talking about here. The software VS Code itself has not connected to the EC2 instance. There's a huge difference between that and connecting the terminal, which is what we've done so far. When you connect VS Code itself to your EC2 instance, you are unlocking VS Code's IDE features, like navigating the files, finding the files, which is what we need to do, and editing the files directly on your EC2 instance. Because right now we can't find our EC2 instance's files. We can't really navigate it very easily. But if you could connect VS Code to your EC2 instance, you can navigate it very, very easily. It's going to become a lot easier for us to edit and manage our web apps files. So now we're going to connect VS Code with our EC2 instance. This is different from just connecting the terminal, i.e. our local computer, to VS Code. So this is different from just connecting the terminal to our instance. And a big shout out, we've got Plaxides in the chat saying hello and excited for the 7-day challenge. Let's go. Thank you so much. I'm excited too. Okay, so we've got our terminal and now we're connecting VS Code to our instance. So this is looking a little different now. We need to not use the terminal anymore. We need to go into the extensions tab. Do you see that extensions button on the left hand side? Please click on the extensions button. And we're now going to find an extension that helps us with using remote SSH with VS Code. So type in remote SSH here and find it. Found it. Okay, so we have remote SSH as the first result here. Click on that and welcome to this handy page that tells you about remote SSH. Now, the remote SSH extension lets you use any remote machine with an SSH server as a development environment. Very good. So in our case, we're using the remote SSH extension to connect to our EC2 instance, that's our remote machine, with an SSH server. So that's going to be that's going to be what remote SSH is going to be used for. And then we're going to use it as our development environment. We're going to use it as the place to write our web apps code. So I'm very excited to be doing this with you. Let's just install it straight away. Click on install. And once it's installed, you can see this double arrow button on the bottom left-hand corner of your VS Code window. So open that window so you can see open a remote window. Let's click on that. Pew. Okay, we've clicked on that. I just realized maybe I can zoom in. Could it help? Yeah, there we go. This is clearer. So do you see this double arrow here? Open a remote window. Pew. Click on that. And now you can see that there's a panel here that says you can connect to a host. Okay, so select this, connect to host. All right, and I just realized this is not the, this is some pre-configured stuff that I already have. So please give me 1 second to switch this out. Okay, there we go. I switched it out. Okay, so this is what you're gonna see. It's gonna say add new SSH host and click on that. All right, so add new SSH host is basically saying let's add a new EC2 instance that we want to connect to. So here we're gonna say which EC2 instance do you want to connect to and how? We've run a command for this before. Do you remember? So earlier in this project, we ran that ssh-i command that helped us with connecting our terminal to the EC2 instance. And this is like a rerun of that command. A handy tip here is if you have your terminal handy. Sorry, 1 second, team. So if you still have your terminal handy on you, okay, there's a way for you to just keep pressing. Oh, actually no, I don't think there is a way for us to do this. Yeah, sorry, I made a mistake there. I was gonna tell you guys about a shortcut, but I just realized it's not the right shortcut to give. I'm gonna go back to connecting to the host, and let's just rerun the command that we ran previously. So it goes ssh-i. Oh, sorry, I should be clicking add new SSH host. Okay, here we are. So once you click on add new SSH host, you run ssh-i. What is your path to your PEM file? Do you still remember that path? So copy that path again. Okay, so for myself, it's like this. Or if you remember, you can always open up the terminal and ask print working directory and then find that full path again. And it should look like this. Okay, so this is the path to your PEM file. And then you're gonna say EC2-user at, and what is your EC2 instance's address? Here you go, copy it and put that in the end of your command. I know these commands look a bit confusing or intense, but please note it is exactly this. Hi SSH, can I please connect to an EC2 instance? Here's the location of my key. This key is going to tell you the reason why I have the permission to connect to that instance. Once I'm connected, I should be logged in as the EC2 user, and here is the location of the instance itself. So, hi SSH, can I please connect to this EC2 instance at this location? Here's my key, here's my permission, and then I'm going to be logging in as the EC2 user. Let's press enter to confirm that this is what we want to do. And we've pressed enter. And now the window at the top says, okay, what file do you want to update? Just pick that first one. It basically says, where do you want to save these connection settings? And we just say, oh, save it in the default file. Just save these connection settings to that first option. Click on that. And now it says host added. It now says, okay, here are the connection settings to this EC2 instance saved here. Press open config, and now you can see that there is, here are your connection settings saved in this file, okay, called config. So here, we can now say, let's just connect to that EC2 instance by, again, clicking on this arrow here, but we're gonna do that in a second. I just realized, let's answer this question together first. We installed remote SSH, which is an extension within VSCode. This extension lets us connect VSCode directly to a remote server, like an EC2 instance. All right, and what was in the configuration file? Okay, what was in the config file? Configuration file details required to set up a remote connection include the host name, i.e. the EC2 instance, or actually instead of the host name, let's just say include the host, which is the EC2 instance's address, the identity file, i.e. the location of our private key, and the user, which is the user that we're logging into for our instance. Okay, so EC2 user again is the default user for getting access to your the default user for using that instance. So we didn't have to set that part up, but it's already set up for us. Okay, so once we're ready to connect, let's click on those double arrows one more time, and let's now select connect to host. Aha! Okay, so this time we're selecting connect to host, but now you can even see your EC2 instances, EC2 instance inside here, right? So we're saying, yeah, let's connect to this EC2 instance that I just set up previously. And once you click on that, it opens up this window. VS Code opens again? Did we just refresh VS Code? What's happening here? Okay, so what's happening here is we're now opening up a version of VS Code that's inside your EC2 instance. It's connected to your EC2 instance. So this is the key difference that I've been talking about. Previously, we connected our terminal to our EC2 instance. Now we're connecting VS Code to the EC2 instance. So we have this whole opening remote kind of deal going on. And it's basically saying now VS Code itself should be able to open the files that are inside our instance. Shall we see whether it works? It seems to be taking its sweet time, that's for sure. Oh, but we're connected. I was honestly expecting an error to pop up at any second because it was taking its time. And usually I'm like, oh, if it's taking that long, it might give me an error, but it didn't. Okay, so we successfully connected to our EC2 instance, and you can see that this is our proof that we've connected. Do you see how before we had the double arrows and just that's it? We don't, in that new window that we opened up, we now have a double arrow, but it also says SSH. So it's basically saying you've now SSH connected to your EC2 instance because this is the name of our EC2 instance. So good, we've connected now. So what's next for us is to open up our web apps files. We created this whole web app using Java and Maven, but we haven't been able to see the files yet. And now this is where VS Code's power really comes through, because we're going to open up the Explorer tab and select Open Folder. Aha! Now we're going to get to open all the files that are inside our EC2 instance. It's going to say what folder do you want to open. And do you see the option that says Network Web Project? This folder is basically the folder that we generated with Maven and Java in the previous step. Remember how we had the archetype command? So you see how we had the archetype command previously, and it said the ID of that created web app should say Network Web Project, right? And now we have Network Web Project showing up as an option. So this is pretty exciting. Let me just go back to where it was. Okay, so once you select Network Web Project, you can select OK. Ta-da! And now you have your web apps files open on the left-hand navigation panel of your VS Code window. You might see this cool little pop-up that says, do you trust the author of the files? And when you see that, just say, yeah, you trust the author of who wrote the file, because it was you. If you don't trust the author, that would be really sus. It means you don't trust yourself. I hope you trust yourself. So you might also see this other pop-up that says, do you want to install this recommended extension from Microsoft? We actually don't need that, so we can close that window. So here we have our web apps files open next to you. And this is pretty exciting. The web app that Maven generated for us is now here. You can even open up these tabs here on the side that lets you expand the subfolders, because these are subfolders. Anything with a little arrow is a subfolder. Expand all the arrows, okay, so they should be pointing down to show that they're expanded. And you can see these are some web app files that were created inside these folders. Here's a little breakdown of these files and folders that you're seeing. SRC means source, and it basically stores all of the source code that defines how your web app looks and works. And then SRC has two subfolders, right? You see these two subfolders inside. One is called resources, which are like the configuration files, like the connection settings and different kinds of things that your web app might be connected to. We don't need that because our web app is just standalone for now. But we also have web app, which is the web app files, right? So these are the files that define how your web app will work. If you click on index.jsp, we got a special file that's ready for us. And you've also got pom.xml. Here we go, which sets up the information, like the metadata for building this web app file. We're not going to worry about pom yet. It's a bit intense by itself. We're going to care a bit more about index.jsp for now. Sachin says, I could not establish, I've got a connection error. That is so common, Sachin. If you see that error, just know you're not alone. I would say 100 students at NextWork have probably run into that error before, and we've definitely been able to solve that error, okay? So if you see that error popping up for connection, so if you see that error popping up, there's so many ways that you could solve this, Sachin, and I'd like for you to have a look at the NextWork community as well as different kinds of places where you can get help. So here's an example. So I'm gonna guess, are you using Windows by any chance? If you're using Windows, there's a special place for you to get help for Windows specifically, and oh, it's here. If you ran into an error, here are all of the different kinds of places where you can get help for it. All right? Did you get the same error when you ran the exact same command in your terminal? If you get an error in VS Code but not in your terminal, that tells me that maybe your command is correct, but maybe you need to install SSH. Into VS Code, the extension. If you run the same command and you run into an error in the terminal, that tells us that the command itself has an error. So please check that out. I would highly recommend just running the same command in your terminal first and then noting down whether you get the same error. Okay, thank you so much, Sachin. Take care, keep going, don't give up. Don't give up. Because you've got a whole community ready to help you here, and I just realized that I've accidentally minimized my entire window. Whoops. I hope this looks okay. Okay, this looks good. Great work. So you fixed it by connecting with Linux instead of Windows. Oh, you fixed it by using a different kind of command? How did you fix it, Sachin? Tell me more. You connected with Linux instead of Windows? I want to know what that means. Tell me more. I'm very curious. Okay. So great work, everyone. We were up to taking a screenshot of our file explorer with all of the project folders expanded. So let's take a screenshot of that. And let's add that to our documentation. And let's talk about it using VS Code's File Explorer. I could see a bunch of folders and subfolders that define our web app. And these folders organize different parts of the web app. For example, the resources subfolder store connection details, while the web app subfolder store web app files for the look and feel of the web app. Oh, I just realized I just repeated myself again. Oh, it's such a bad habit, isn't it? All right. I'll move that over. And then you can also see, maybe instead we can say folders can be expanded by clicking on all of the angled brackets. And I'm going to put that in here. I'll also mention SRC since it's mentioned in the prompt. SRC is the parent folder that contains all the source code for the web app. All right. Great question here. That says, I had the same error, but I tried connecting with Linux and Windows already. I have remote SSH installed and the command worked on my terminal. Anyone else with a similar issue? Oh, interesting. So you tried connecting with Linux and with Windows. You have remote SSH installed and the command worked on your terminal. I'm very curious too, Skizzers. This is a cool. You know what? I'm gonna pause a little bit for the project guide because I have a feeling a lot of people might run into this error, and it's always nice to have a video kind of demonstration of how you might be able to resolve this. So I think where we ran into the error, where we had that error banner, it was right here. So I thought some ways that you can troubleshoot this is first by checking out the Nextword community, where we have a whole community of people talking about these different kinds of errors and troubleshooting it together. So, big shout out to this video guide created by Praneeth on connecting to your EC2 instance. I would like to mention that we also have something. Oh, I actually thought it was here. We also have this post here about connecting to your EC2 instance over SSH. I think what I do actually is find another one of these videos created by Praneeth. So this is just almost like a how-to guide for finding answers with the community. But there's another guide that might be able to help you here. Let me just find that post for you now. And here's like another video post that might be able to help you. And it's a video that genuinely goes through step by step on how you can connect VS Code with your EC2 instance as a Windows user. So if you'd like, I would highly recommend checking out this video. And if the command works on your terminal, I wonder whether or not your config file has been saved properly. So you see how you have to select a config file to update when you run your command for SSH connection. I would double check whether or not you're using the correct config file, and whether or not, if you were to check the config file, if all the details here are correct. Cool. And there's even a mention here that instead of making sure that when you check your config file, make sure that the identity file, that path, is correct to your key pair. So I would check the config file first to Skizzers. Hopefully that helps with resolving it. Keep us updated though. I'm very, very curious to know how you end up resolving this error, because you will. Okay, so yeah, connecting. Okay, all good. And we've got Warren asking, great to learn your platform. Do you have a community? How to join it, please? Thanks so much for mentioning that, Warren. And I'm very excited to invite you to the community. This is where you can go. So this is the Nextwork community link. Let me add that to the chat. And I hope to see you there. Oh yeah, there's a whole post about joining the DevOps challenge. Cool. All right. So I'm going to keep going with the project guide now, but stop me at any time if you have any errors. These errors are extremely important to talk about, and it's great to talk about them live. Oh yeah, and if you wanted access to the post that I opened up just now about connecting VSCode as a Windows user, here is the post. I will put that in the chat too. Okay, so let's keep on going. We're almost done now. We just have one task left to do. And this is about modifying your index.jsp. So you know how we have all of these files. The index.jsp file is a file used in web apps to display what's going to be in your web app. I just realized that was such an interesting sentence. So index.jsp is a file that's kind of similar to HTML because it contains markup to display what's going to be inside your page. So in this case, we got index.jsp showing us that it has HTML code, that there's a body, and inside that body there's just one heading that says hello world. A very, very classic thing to say to start up a website. So the cool thing about Java or JSP files is that it also can contain dynamic content, which is beyond HTML. So instead of just having a static web page, what if you can also have a social media feed that always refreshes and shows you new things? That's dynamic content. It always refreshes and shows you new things. That's basically the definition of it. So that's why we really like Java and using index.jsp instead of index.html. Here is, now that you have VS Code in front of you, you have an IDE, you see how you have this lovely interface for clicking and editing your file? That means we can, even copy this code and completely replace it here to update the file inside. So index.jsp, you update it like this, and then when you're done, make sure to press Ctrl S so that the circle disappears. And once the circle disappears, it means you saved the file. Let me just do this again. So let's say I make another change. See how there's a circle that says that I have unsaved changes? Press Ctrl S, and that basically saves the file and saves your edits. Cool. So let's put that again into your documentation. And index.jsp is the file in our web app that defines both HTML content, i.e. the static elements that go into our web apps page, as well as any code for generating dynamic content, i.e. content that's always changing. We edited index.jsp by updating the HTML code to also say, hello, your name. Of course, if you've been paying close attention, do you see this? Don't forget to replace the your name placeholder with your name. So here's where I would say, hello, Natasha, or hello, Nextwork, to actually make a real change that makes it yours. This is the part where you put in your name, okay? Make this web app yours. And press Ctrl S again to save those changes. We also added a paragraph, i.e. some text that says, this is my web app working. Nice work! So that is your first project done. You've learned how to set up a web app on an EC2 instance and connect it to VSCode, which is one of the most popular and practical IDEs out there. So every single project for the rest of this 7-day DevOps challenge is going to be adding on to what you've just set up. That was crazy. If this is your very first AWS project, just know you've done something huge today. If this is your first time using VSCode, your first time doing an SSH connection, your first time editing an index.jsp file, I hope these milestones are something that you'll take away and continue applying in future projects. I know that applying things by yourself is so daunting sometimes. You know, it's like, oh, but where do I start? How do I know I'm doing this right? And that's why you still have 6 days left in this 7-day DevOps challenge, where we're going to keep on building our web app and, of course, keep on building a CI/CD pipeline that makes it possible to flow the code from editing the code, you know what we're doing here, editing and saving the code, all the way to seeing the edited code in our deployed app automatically. It's an amazing feeling. It's an amazing process. And I can't wait to show you guys what it looks like in 6 projects from now. All right. Now, if you're new to Nixwork, you might be new to the concept of secret missions. So I'm going to introduce you guys to something called a secret mission. And in a secret mission, what you get to do is you get to do something advanced that tells you even more about what we've learned today. Secret missions are optional. You do not need to do secret missions in order to complete a project. You can still generate your documentation today. Congratulations. It is still a project well done and completely done. A secret mission is more like an add-on. Okay, so when you're ready, let's learn what you could do to edit code without an IDE. Imagine if VS Code didn't exist. What would editing code look like? We're doing this because it's going to teach you exactly why we love an IDE. It's going to be a little bit painful to do the secret mission because it's supposed to be hard. You know, it's supposed to be less convenient to edit code without an IDE. So let's unlock our secret mission today. And let's get started. So in this secret mission today, we're editing code without an IDE. This is going to teach us why IDEs like VS Code are so well loved and how they make editing code much easier. All right, so let's enter that. And I'm just gonna double check our chat to see if we have any questions. All right, we're all good. Okay, so from here, we've got this remote SSH window, which is, you know, this thing that we've set up that lets us see our EC2 instances web app files. But what if this remote SSH connection didn't exist? What if we didn't really use VS Code to connect to our EC2 instance? Let's switch our windows back. So right-click on VS Code and switch back to the window that you were using without any without an SSH connection. So this is going to be the config file for me. Okay, this is the window. That's the window without that SSH connection between VS Code and my instance. You know this is correct by checking that bottom left-hand corner again. Do you see the double arrow? And it's just the double arrow, you know, because if you see the bigger blue box that also has SSH, it means you're still at the VS Code connection to your EC2 instance. We don't want that. We just want to see the double arrows by themselves. Okay, so once you're back here, we're now going to try answer the same question. How are you going to access your web app files from the terminal? You know, you no longer have your IDE or your very, very easy to use file explorer to explore your files. You only have this terminal connection to your EC2 instance. So turns out the terminal is really a place where you can edit code as well. It's not just a place for running commands. You can actually write files within the terminal. So make sure your terminal is actually still connected to the EC2 instance. It should still say EC2 user blah 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 at the start. And when you're here, you can run pwd to see where you're at inside your terminal connection. Here we can see that we're inside the EC2 user folder. Okay, ooh, interesting. The EC2 user folder is kind of like the main folder above Network Web project. So it's another folder above our project folder. So the first thing we're going to want to do is say, oh, I know I'm in the root folder, EC2 user, but I'm going to navigate into the Network Web project folder, right? You can run ls. Everyone can run ls because right now this is an Amazon Linux instance. So even if you use a Windows computer, you're running ls now because you're inside a Linux instance. So you're running Linux commands. So everyone run ls, and you can see that you can find your project folder name here. And then you're going to say, all right, let's try going inside it. cd network-web-project. And now you're inside that folder where you can run ls again. And aha, now you see src, which is a familiar site because src is the folder that contains our source code, right? But now, as you might imagine, you have to keep running all of these navigation commands because you have to keep going folder down, folder down, folder down, folder down. So we're going to say, all right, let's go cd again and go inside src, run ls, and you have main. Okay, so let's go cd again. Let's go inside the main folder this time, main, and let's say what's inside ls. We got resources and we've got web app, another two folders. Again, a familiar site because we've got src, we've got main, and then we've got resources and web app. The file we want to edit is our index.jsp file. So where is our index.jsp file? Do you remember? It's inside the web app folder. So let's go cd web app like this. I realize it's harder to read. So cd web app. Again, run ls, and now you can see what's inside is your index.jsp file. You've opened it now. Very good. So now that you're inside here, here's the command that you've been waiting for. Nano is a command that lets you open up your index.jsp file and edit it. So this is a Linux command we're using here. It's called nano. And then it's gonna open up your file like this inside the terminal. So welcome to nano. I know it looks a little freaky, but it literally means you're opening up a file within your IDE. Nano also lets you edit the file within the IDE, which is pretty helpful. Okay, so let's take a screenshot of the nano window. If you're new to it, it's like, whoa. I know it can be like pretty intense the first time you see it because you're now seeing a file that's open inside a window that you thought was only for commands. Yeah, I know, the terminal is so powerful, isn't it? Okay, so an alternative to using IDEs is within the terminal itself. To edit index.jsp, I ran cd commands. Oh, sorry, we ran cd commands because we're doing this project together. We ran cd commands to navigate our terminal to the right subfolder, and then ran the nano command to use nano to open up and start editing the index.jsp file. So now you can try editing the code. Try using your arrow keys to go down, 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 down. And it says you see how it says the line? It says this is my Network Web App breaking. Let's add a new line under that line. And it should say, I'm writing this line using nano instead of an IDE. So you can copy that code block here and then press Control V or Command V on your keyboard to paste this. And press Control, a few commands now. We're going to press Control S save the file and then press Control X to exit the file. And now we've exited Nano. And you can now reflect. How did that feel for editing your index.jsp compared to directly using an IDE? Compared to using an IDE, editing index.jsp in the terminal felt a little less intuitive, as you have to use your keyboard to navigate your cursor. I'd be more likely to use an IDE if I had lots of bits of code to update and delete, or copy and paste, i.e. lots of navigating within the file. And as you can see, you can only see one file at a time, whereas with an IDE, you can open up multiple files and edit multiple files concurrently, which is a lot easier than having just one window, one file. All right, as a finishing touch, let's go back to the window that had that remote SSH connection. So you see, if you were to right-click on VSCode, there is this window option that has that really, really long name with SSH in it. Open that, and that opens back up your window, your VSCode window with SSH, and check inside the index.jsp file. Do you see this? It's like magic, eh? Look, that new line you wrote using Nano is now showing inside your VSCode window. So that's right. That's the beauty of working with SSH connections. Both your local terminal and your VSCode window are connected directly to the EC2 instance. So they're actually looking at the exact same file in real time, just with separate connections. Any changes you make over one connection is instantly visible in the other one because they're really communicating to the same environment, and that same environment is communicating back the same file to your VSCode window and to that terminal connection, and saying hello back to Vihan in the chat. All right, to verify our editing work in the terminal, we opened back up our VSCode window that had the SSH connection to our EC2 instance. It was possible to see our changes in VSCode right away because the window shared the same SSH connection to our instance as the terminal. Amazing, isn't it? That's such a beautiful moment. I really like that secret mission. I really like being able to open up my VS Code window and to see that exact line that I wrote over Nano. I love that part so much. Okay, here's the wrap up for today's project. Let's make sure we delete all of our resources, and just know that if you're doing day 2 of our 7-day DevOps challenge, if you want to do that today, you actually can. The project for that is already available inside the Nextwork platform. All you got to do is search GitHub. So if I were to search this, I can find the 7-day DevOps challenge, and I can click on the next project here, which is to connect a GitHub repo with AWS. All right, so that option is totally available to you. And yeah, you can honestly just do that, jump to that project and not delete your resources, because that next project is completely connected to what you're doing today. But do make sure that before you go, just before you go, please make sure to complete all your tasks and download today's documentation. So let's complete our tasks at the bottom. Complete this one. And then you'll be able to download your documentation by going into Mission Accomplished at the very end and selecting Mission Accomplished. Okay, that's all you got to do. But for us, let us make sure that we delete everything today because I'm not going to be continuing this project until tomorrow, and I'd rather start from the top tomorrow rather than assuming that we can start from the middle tomorrow. So my preference is to delete everything. It's also the more safer thing to do. So to start, I'm going to go back to EC2. So find your EC2 console, and you know how you have your selected EC2 instance next to DevOps and Tasha. Let's select instance state over here and select terminate or delete the instance. All right, so let's delete that and select terminate, select delete, and it's gone. Next up, your key pair. We don't need that anymore. So let's go over to, oh my gosh, and you can see VSCode jumping because the moment we deleted the instance, everything inside is gone. So that's all done now. We can't connect to this EC2 instance anymore. It's terminated. You can just simply close the window and finish that up. But once the instance is deleted, you also have your key pair that you can delete. Remember that key that lets you connect and authenticate to your instance? This is optional. You don't have to delete it if you already have a key, if you want to continue with this DevOps challenge. I recommend it. For better security, you would delete it and just create a new key pair next time. So in our case, you can select next to key pair like this, and under actions, select delete, and that just deletes your key pair. Okay? Like this, and delete that. All right, so we're all done today, and then we'll just wrap up with a few questions and then download our documentation. Services we used in this project today were VSCode and Amazon EC2. Key concepts we learned include SSH connections, using an IDE. That's a loud dog. I hope it quietens down. We learned about SSH connections. We learned about using an IDE, launching an instance. What else did we learn about? Do you remember? We also learned about, I would say, editing an index.jsp file. And using key pairs. All right. What's one thing you didn't expect in this project today? One thing we didn't expect in this project today was the secret mission, where we also used the local terminal to try edit a file after using an IDE. It was fun for me to compare the difference in experience and to also still see the changes made over the terminal show up. Oh, I just realized I could do this here to make it even easier to read. And still see the changes made over the terminal show up in, where else did it show up? In the VSCode window. Okay? This project took us 2.5 hours, including demo time and some troubleshooting time. It was most rewarding. I really, really like having a successful SSH connection. It's just a moment of relief for myself. So it was most rewarding to see a successful SSH connection to our EC2 instance, whether that's over the terminal or over the VS Code SSH connection. All right, so thank you so much for doing this project today. We did this project today to kickstart the 7-day DevOps challenge. Challenge well accepted now. And it's great to set up a web app in the cloud using EC2 and VS Code. So when are you going to do the next project in this series? It's a 7-day DevOps challenge. I'm going to be doing the next one tomorrow. When are you going to be doing the next one? Is it tomorrow for you too? Or is it today, if you want to challenge it soon? This project was part 1 of a series of DevOps projects where I'm building a CI/CD pipeline. I'll be working on the next project tomorrow. Well done. All right, thank you so much to everyone for the lovely messages. You are a fantastic instructor. This was the first video I saw on this channel and was really impressed by the quality. Thank you so much, H. That means a lot. Have a wonderful rest of the day. I hope you do too, SH, and I hope to see you in the next project. Omar asked, will we use Jenkins in the pipeline? That's going to be an extension to this project, but by default, we're going to be using Code Pipeline so that our entire setup is with AWS services. And yes, Jenkins is going to be an extension. Omar says monkey type. Damn, I wonder what that means, Omar. Is that a compliment? I don't know. Well, what does monkey type mean? I'm so curious. Okay, we're all done with all of our tasks for this project. I know that was a bit of a marathon today, but I'm very, very glad that we asked lots of questions, that we got a lot set up, and a big shout out to all of the beginners asking me questions about things that I actually skipped over and I wasn't even aware that I was skipping over. So this has been great. I'm really excited for all the beginners after this live to check out this and to also get the answers that might be in their minds when they were watching this as well. So thank you so much and shout out to all the questions that were asked. Okay, it's the moment of truth. It's time for us to share everything. So let us select mission accomplished at the end of this page and finish up for today. Oh, it says I can't complete yet. Did I have something that I missed? Oh, this might be a little error that I might have run into earlier. If you see the same error, that you can't seem to complete the project, just know that's completely normal. It happens sometimes. And the fastest way to just check is to just see if you have all your tasks completed. It says that I've completed everything. Oh, there he is. Mission accomplished. Oh my goodness, I was holding my breath there, everyone. And let's just complete the mission. Okay, and let's open up our documentation. Are you excited for this? I don't know what's more satisfying sometimes, opening the documentation or like completing the project in AWS, because they're equally as amazing. In my opinion. So here are some things that you can do to share your project. You can save it to your portfolio. So by default, I'm just going to save my project to my Nextdoor portfolio. Click save. And I'm just going to let that save. It's going to take a little second. Okay, and I think it's saved now. So I can go check out that in my portfolio in a second. I'm going to show you what it looks like. In fact, I'm going to just open that in a new tab, my portfolio. In the meantime, we also have dark mode for your documentation. So you can click on dark mode, for example, and you can even say, save my project as a PDF file. So save it as a PDF and download that right now. So now the same document that you've created is going to save as a PDF. Why would you want to save as a PDF? To upload your work on LinkedIn, for example, or also for safekeeping in your computer. So here I'm going to, I think there was a lag for a second, but here I clicked on generate social post. I generated a LinkedIn post, and here we have an amazing pre-filled LinkedIn post that you can use to share about what you did today. So here you can press the X button to close this little preview, because we're going to say no. We're going to upload a document, and we're going to upload our PDF documentation that we just downloaded. Okay, so this project was called Set Up a Web App in the Cloud. Like this. And here, while we wait for that to load, this is what my portfolio looks like. This is my Nextwork portfolio with my documentation. And you can see everything that I've written today is here, and it's looking beautiful. And it's a part of my portfolio. Okay, so you can see it, my project is here now. And I can also see a PDF version, the dark mode version of what I've written today over here too. It looks pretty good, I have to say. I'm pretty impressed with it. You know, and you can scroll through and just see all of your answers and screenshots showing up. Yeah, that looks amazing. I'm very impressed. So here you can upload your PDF so everyone can see it in your LinkedIn post, and then you can click post and you're all done. All right, so congratulations on completing this project today. I hope you're extremely proud of yourself. This is an amazing piece of documentation and hands-on work experience that you've just built in just 2 hours. So great shout out to everyone that says you'll be there. Thank you so much. And tomorrow we are going to be continuing with our CI/CD pipeline in day 2 of our DevOps challenge. In day 2, we're going to be learning a lot about GitHub. In fact, there's actually an intro to tomorrow's work here. We're going to be setting up a GitHub repository to store our web apps code. Okay, so in that GitHub repository, just know that yes, it's true that GitHub isn't a AWS service, but just like VSCode, it's super versatile. So we're going to be using GitHub to store the code so that in future projects, it's going to be a lot easier to just retrieve a saved version of all of your code instead of having to write all of your code from scratch each time. GitHub is also going to be a very, very, very key part. It's also going to be a very, very key part of our CI/CD pipeline. So do make sure to check out tomorrow's project. I will see you there. And a big shout out to Skizzers. What a cherry on top for today's live. You fixed your error. It's because your folders was using AWS projects and spaces are not allowed. That is so true. And I'm going to add that to our troubleshooting guide. I think this is something that I easily did when I first did my first SSH connection. So let me make sure that's in our troubleshooting guide. And we're all done today. Thank you so much, Skizzers, for the update. I'm finishing this live with such a happy vibe because it's the start of an amazing series, amazing challenge, and we've got some great people doing it. So I'll see you all in the next project. And for anyone that's also wondering if it's okay to keep the instance running for tomorrow's project, my personal advice is to remove it, because if you build that habit of running an instance, it is going to be very easy to accidentally leave something running for multiple days and to let it rack up bills. But if you're curious, there's actually something called the free tier website in Amazon. So visit AWS's free tier website if you're ever like feeling a bit confused about whether or not you can leave something running. It seems like their free tier page has changed. Is this free tier stuff? Doesn't seem like it. This is not the page I was looking for. Let me see. You can find free tier for EC2, for example. Whoa, what's this? Something changed in my life. Oh, no way. This is the wildest live I've ever run. I actually can't believe that background is showing right now. Okay, I'll just change that back to black. That was so wild. Sorry, team. So we've got free tier for EC2 that you can use, Gangada. Oh, it really isn't working today, is it? This page is not what it's supposed to be. What a wild time to be opening up a page that's directing us to the wrong place. Okay, so for EC2, you can keep something running for free for a short period of time. So back to the bad page. Okay, but for more context, you get 750 hours per month for free with EC2. It's simply that if you go over 750 hours, which if I were to calculate, oh, sorry, actually it's 24. If you keep your instance running, the same instance running for the whole month, it should be free. But if you have multiple instances running, then you don't have that many hours to spare. So I would say you can leave it running, Gangara, bottom line, it's possible. But if you want to be safe, you would delete it, unless you're just super sure that you're definitely going to do this project again in the next week or so. Then it should be okay to leave it running. All right, so thank you so much again to everyone for tuning into this project. That was so much fun. I'm really hyped for the next few projects for us. And I'll see you then. All right, thank you everyone. Bye.